The HOA president hated my disabled daughter. She said Emma's wheelchair ruined the neighborhood. One morning she kicked Emma's chair over. My daughter's face hit the ground. Her teeth broke. Blood everywhere. That day Margaret Henderson made a big mistake. She turned a mother into her worst enemy. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The screaming woke me at dawn. Not my daughter's screams, though God knows I had heard those enough times in her 16 years of life. No, this was different. This was the sound of pure hatred, raw and venomous, cutting through the peaceful morning air of our supposedly perfect suburban neighborhood. I ran to Emma's bedroom window and looked down at our front lawn. My heart stopped. My daughter lay on the grass, her wheelchair overturned beside her, one wheel still spinning slowly in the early morning light. Blood, so much blood, pooled beneath her face, staining the green grass crimson. And standing over her, chest heaving with rage, was Margaret Henderson, the HOA president everyone called Karen behind her back. "You do not belong here," Margaret screamed, her face twisted with disgust. "You and your crippled daughter are ruining this neighborhood." I don't remember running down the stairs. I don't remember opening the door. The next thing I knew, I was on my knees beside Emma, cradling her head in my lap while she choked on her own blood. "Mom," she whispered, and when she opened her mouth, I saw the horror. Her two front teeth were gone, shattered and broken, leaving jagged stumps behind. Blood poured from her gums, mixing with her tears. "Call an ambulance." I screamed at the neighbors who had started to gather. But they just stood there, frozen, staring at us like we were some kind of terrible accident they couldn't look away from. Margaret backed away slowly, her hand covering her mouth. For one brief second I saw something flash across her face. Was it regret? Fear? But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that same cold mask she always wore. "She attacked me first," Margaret said loudly, looking at the gathering crowd. "I was just defending myself." It was a lie. A complete, calculated lie. And in that moment, holding my bleeding daughter while this monster tried to paint herself as the victim, something inside me broke. Or maybe it didn't break. Maybe something new was born, something dark and vengeful and absolutely merciless. I looked up at Margaret Henderson and made her a silent promise. I would destroy her. Completely. Utterly. She had taken my daughter's smile. I would take everything she had ever loved. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this nightmare really began. Let me tell you how a simple dream of a better life turned into a war that would consume us all. The house was perfect. Absolutely perfect. After 12 years of saving every penny, working double shifts at the hospital, skipping meals and vacations and anything that wasn't absolutely necessary, I had finally scraped together enough money for a down payment. The house in Riverside Estates was everything we needed. Single-story, wide doorways, a bathroom that could accommodate Emma's wheelchair, and a bedroom with windows that looked out onto a garden where she could watch the birds. "Mom, it's beautiful," Emma had whispered when we first toured it, her eyes shining with tears. At 16, she had lived in 5 different apartments, each smaller and more cramped than the last. She had never had a real yard. Never had space to move freely. Never had a place that felt like home. "We're going to be so happy here, baby," I told her, squeezing her hand. I should have known better. I should have seen the signs. But I was so focused on giving Emma the life she deserved that I missed all the warning signals screaming at me to run. The neighbors seemed friendly enough at first. They smiled and waved when we moved in. An older couple, the Johnsons, even brought over a casserole. "Welcome to the neighborhood," Mrs. Johnson said warmly. "If you need anything, we're right next door." But I noticed the way Mr. Johnson's eyes lingered on Emma's wheelchair. The way his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. The way he stepped back as if disability might be contagious. Still, I told myself I was being paranoid. Not everyone was comfortable around disabled people. It didn't mean they were bad people. They just needed time to adjust. Then Margaret Henderson came knocking. She arrived exactly 3 days after we moved in, wearing a cream-colored blazer and carrying a leather-bound folder like it was the Bible itself. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tightly it looked painful, and her lipstick was the color of blood. "I'm Margaret Henderson, HOA president," she announced without bothering to introduce herself properly or ask my name. "We need to discuss your violations." Violations? We had barely finished unpacking. I invited her in, my first mistake, and she walked through my home like a general inspecting troops, her nose wrinkled in disgust at the cardboard boxes still stacked in corners, at Emma's medical equipment in the living room, at everything about our lives that didn't fit her vision of suburban perfection. "First," Margaret said, pulling out a document, "that wheelchair ramp at your front entrance. It's not in the architectural guidelines. It needs to be removed immediately. The blood drained from my face. But my daughter can't get in and out of the house without it. She uses a wheelchair. I can see that, Margaret said coldly. But the HOA has standards. That metal ramp is an eyesore. It brings down property values. You should have requested approval before installation. We did request approval, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. 2 months ago. We never heard back. Margaret flipped through her folder. I don't have any record of that. Regardless, the ramp needs to go. You have 72 hours to remove it, or you'll be fined $500 per day. But. No buts. Rules are rules. This is a community that takes pride in its appearance. If we make exceptions for everyone, where does it end? She snapped her folder shut. Oh, and your trash cans are visible from the street. They need to be stored in your garage. That's another $100 fine per day. I'll send you the invoice. She left before I could respond, her heels clicking on my hardwood floors like gunshots. Emma had been listening from her room. When I went to check on her, I found her staring out the window, silent tears running down her cheeks. We can't take the ramp away, Mom, she said quietly. I won't be able to leave the house. We're not taking it away, I promised, pulling her into a hug. I'll fight this. We have rights. The Fair Housing Act protects us. But even as I said it, I felt a cold dread settling in my stomach. Margaret Henderson didn't look like someone who cared about laws or rights or fairness. She looked like someone who would burn down the world to protect her precious property values. I had no idea how right I was. Margaret didn't just want us gone. She wanted us to suffer first. It started small. A notice that our grass was 1 inch taller than the allowed height, $50 fine. Another notice that our mailbox was the wrong shade of black, $75 fine. A third notice that Emma's wheelchair had been left on our front porch overnight, $100 fine for storing equipment improperly. Every single day there was a new notice, a new violation, a new fine. I paid them at first, terrified of what would happen if I didn't. But the money was adding up fast and we couldn't afford it. I was already stretching every dollar to cover Emma's medical expenses, her physical therapy, her medications. The HOA fines were going to bankrupt us. Mom, maybe we should just move, Emma said one night after I spent 3 hours on the phone arguing with the HOA management company. No, I said firmly. We worked too hard for this house. We deserve to be here just as much as anyone else. Margaret Henderson is a bully and I'm not going to let her win. But Margaret was just getting started. Next came the anonymous complaints. Someone reported that Emma's wheelchair was too loud and disturbed the peace of the neighborhood. Someone else claimed that our house had a medical smell that was offensive. A third complaint stated that having a disabled child in the neighborhood was depressing and lowered morale. I knew who was behind them. Of course I did. But I couldn't prove it. Then the vandalism began. Our trash cans were knocked over every single night, garbage strewn across our lawn. Someone spray-painted "Cripple House" on our driveway. Emma's wheelchair ramp was covered in dog feces twice in 1 week. I installed security cameras. The footage showed Margaret's son, a 35-year-old man named Brad who still lived with his mother, as the culprit. I took the evidence to the police. We'll file a report, the officer said, barely glancing at the video. Aren't you going to arrest him? This is vandalism. Harassment. Hate crimes. The officer, his name tag read Henderson, looked at me with barely concealed contempt. Ma'am, we don't have the resources to investigate every petty neighborhood dispute. Maybe if you and your daughter tried to fit in better, you wouldn't have these problems. My hands shook with rage. Are you related to Margaret Henderson? He smiled. She's my sister. And let me give you some free advice. She doesn't lose. Ever. You should move while you still can. I left the police station feeling sick. They were all connected. Margaret had her hooks in everyone, the police, the HOA board, even the local government. We were alone in this fight. But I wasn't going to give up. Not yet. While I battled the HOA, Emma was fighting her own war at school. She had always struggled to make friends. The wheelchair made her different and kids could be incredibly cruel. But at her old school she had found a small group of outcasts like herself. The art kids, the drama nerds, the ones who didn't quite fit the mold. They had accepted her. The new school was different. Riverside Estates fed into Lakewood High, a pristine institution where everyone seemed to have perfect hair, perfect clothes, and perfect lives. Emma stuck out like a wounded bird in a nest of eagles. How was your first day? I asked eagerly when I picked her up. Fine, she said, but I could see she had been crying. Emma talked to me. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, they stared at me, Mom. All day. Like I was some kind of freak show. And in PE class, the teacher didn't know what to do with me, so she just left me sitting on the sidelines while everyone else played volleyball. I sat there for 50 minutes watching while they all laughed and had fun. My heart shattered. Did you tell the teacher how that made you feel? What's the point? Emma said bitterly. She doesn't care. Nobody cares. They all just wish I would disappear. It got worse. Emma came home with bruises on her arms. Someone had accidentally run into her wheelchair in the hallway. Her books were knocked out of her lap repeatedly. Someone posted photos of her on social media with cruel captions, "Riverside's rolling disaster, and does she come with training wheels?" I complained to the school. They promised to investigate. Nothing changed. Emma stopped eating. She lost weight, her already thin frame becoming almost skeletal. She stopped doing her homework. Her grades plummeted. At night, I would hear her crying in her room, muffled sobs that tore my soul apart. "Baby, please, you have to fight," I begged her. "Don't let them win." "I'm tired of fighting, Mom," she whispered. "I'm so tired. Every single day is a battle just to exist. At home, that awful woman hates us. At school, everyone treats me like I'm invisible or disgusting. What's the point? Why should I keep trying when nobody wants me here anyway?" I didn't have an answer for her. Because she was right, nobody wanted us there. We were outsiders in our own neighborhood, our own community. We had committed the unforgivable sin of being different. But I couldn't let Emma give up. I wouldn't let Margaret Henderson and her army of small-minded bullies destroy my daughter's spirit. So I made a decision. I would go to war. Not just for our house or our rights, but for Emma's soul. I found Sarah Chin through a disability rights organization. She was a fierce civil rights attorney with a reputation for crushing HOAs that discriminated against disabled residents. Her fees were astronomical. Money I didn't have, but she agreed to take our case on contingency. "This is textbook housing discrimination," Sarah said after reviewing our documentation. "The Fair Housing Act is crystal clear. They cannot deny you reasonable accommodations for your daughter's disability. They cannot fine you for having a wheelchair ramp. And they sure as hell cannot harass you the way they have been. So we can win?" I asked, hope blooming in my chest for the first time in months. "We're going to do more than win," Sarah said, her eyes gleaming. "We're going to make an example out of Margaret Henderson. When I'm done with her, she'll wish she had never met you." We filed a federal lawsuit against the HOA, Margaret personally, and the management company. The allegations included discrimination, harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and violation of the Fair Housing Act. Margaret's response was swift and vicious. The HOA fines tripled overnight. $500 for leaving our porch light on past 10 p.m. $750 for Emma's medical supply delivery truck parking in front of our house for 15 minutes. $1,000 for creating a hostile environment by filing a frivolous lawsuit. Then came the foreclosure notice. According to the HOA, we owed over $40,000 in accumulated fines and fees. If we didn't pay within 30 days, they would begin foreclosure proceedings on our house. "They can't do this," I told Sarah, panicking. "We'll lose everything." "They're trying to scare you into dropping the lawsuit," Sarah said calmly. "Don't worry. I'll file for an emergency injunction. But Emily, you need to prepare yourself. This is going to get ugly before it gets better. Margaret Henderson is fighting for her reputation and her power. She's going to come at you with everything she has." "I don't care," I said, and I meant it. "I'm not backing down. Not now. Not ever. But I should have been more careful. I should have protected Emma better. Because Margaret's next move wasn't aimed at me. It was aimed at my daughter." Emma had developed a small routine that brought her joy. Every Saturday morning, she would wheel herself out to our front lawn and draw. She loved art. It was her escape from the cruelty of the world around her. She would spend hours with her sketchpad and colored pencils, creating beautiful, intricate drawings of butterflies, flowers, and imaginary worlds where wheelchairs didn't exist and everyone was treated with kindness. I would check on her every 15 minutes, watching from the kitchen window while I did household chores. She was always safe, always peaceful, lost in her own creative world. That Saturday started like any other. Emma went outside at 8 a.m. with her art supplies. I was inside folding laundry, glancing out the window regularly to make sure she was okay. At 8:47 a.m., Margaret Henderson came home from wherever she had been. Her car pulled into her driveway across the street. She got out, looked at Emma sitting on our lawn, and her face contorted with rage. I watched through the window as Margaret marched across the street. My stomach dropped. I ran for the door. But I was too late. By the time I reached the front porch, Margaret was standing over Emma, screaming, "How dare you sit there like you own this neighborhood? Every time I look outside, I have to see you and that disgusting contraption. Do you know what you've done to property values? Do you know how many potential buyers have walked away because they don't want to live near a cripple?" Emma shrank back in her wheelchair, her face pale with fear. "I'm not hurting anyone. I'm just drawing." "You're hurting all of us," Margaret shrieked. "You're a blight. An eyesore. Your mother is too stupid and stubborn to understand that you don't belong here, so I'm going to make it very clear." Then Margaret kicked Emma's wheelchair. Not a small kick. Not an accidental bump. A full, violent kick that sent the wheelchair tipping over. Time seemed to slow down. I saw Emma's eyes go wide with terror. I saw the wheelchair tilting, falling. I saw my daughter's body hit the ground face first, her hands unable to catch herself because of her cerebral palsy. The crack of her face hitting the concrete was the worst sound I've ever heard. Emma didn't scream. She just lay there, stunned, blood already pooling beneath her face. When she tried to lift her head, blood poured from her mouth. Her lips were split. Her nose was bleeding. And when she opened her mouth to cry for me, I saw the horror. Her 2 front teeth were gone. Not just chipped or cracked, completely gone. Shattered on impact. Pieces of tooth mixed with blood on the sidewalk. "What have you done?" I screamed at Margaret, dropping to my knees beside Emma. Margaret backed away, her hand over her mouth, her face suddenly pale. "I just wanted to scare her. I didn't mean." "You kicked her wheelchair. You assaulted my disabled daughter." Neighbors were coming out of their houses now, drawn by the screaming. Someone called 911. Mrs. Johnson was crying. Even Mr. Johnson looked horrified. Emma was trembling in my arms, going into shock. Blood covered her face, her shirt, my hands. She tried to speak, but only gurgling sounds came out, choked with blood and broken teeth. "It's okay, baby," I sobbed, holding her. "Help is coming. You're going to be okay." But she wasn't okay. Nothing would ever be okay again. The ambulance seemed to take forever. Emma was conscious but barely responsive, her eyes glazed and distant. The paramedics stabilized her neck. She had hit her head hard enough that they worried about spinal damage. At the hospital, doctors rushed her into emergency care. I paced the waiting room, Emma's blood still drying on my clothes, my hands shaking so badly I couldn't hold a cup of water. Sarah Chin arrived within an hour, her face grim. "I heard. How is she?" "I don't know. They haven't told me anything. The police are here. They want a statement." I gave my statement to a different officer than before, thankfully not Margaret's brother. I told him everything. He took notes, asked questions, and seemed genuinely concerned. "We'll arrest Mrs. Henderson for assault," he said. "This is a clear-cut case. There are witnesses. You have security footage. She's going to jail." But he was wrong. Margaret Henderson was arrested, booked, and released on bail within 6 hours. Her expensive lawyers immediately went to work. They claimed Emma had verbally attacked Margaret first. They said Margaret had only touched the wheelchair to move it out of her way, and Emma had overreacted by falling. They even suggested that Emma had deliberately thrown herself from the wheelchair to frame Margaret. It was insane. It was obviously lies. But Margaret had money, connections, and a team of lawyers who specialized in making guilty people look innocent. Meanwhile, Emma was in surgery. The dentist who examined her delivered the devastating news. Her 2 front permanent teeth were destroyed beyond repair. The roots were shattered. They couldn't be saved or replanted. She would need dental implants, but not until she was older. Her jaw was still developing. For now, she would have a gap in her smile. When Emma finally woke up after surgery, her face was swollen and bruised. She had 13 stitches in her lower lip. Her nose was broken. She looked at me with hollow eyes and asked, "Do I still have to live there?" "What? Baby, no. We're moving. As soon as you're better, we're leaving. I don't care about the lawsuit or the house. I just want you safe." But Emma shook her head weakly. "If we leave, she wins. She wanted us gone and we're gone. She'll do the same thing to the next family that doesn't fit her perfect picture. Someone has to stop her, Mom." Tears streamed down my face. "Emma, you almost died. Your teeth are just teeth," she interrupted, though I could see the pain in her eyes. "But if we run away, she gets to keep hurting people. Promise me, Mom. Promise me you'll finish this. Make her pay for what she did. Not just to me but to everyone she's ever bullied." I held my daughter's hand, this brave, broken, beautiful girl who had endured more pain than anyone should ever have to suffer, and I made a promise. I'm going to destroy her, I whispered. I'm going to take everything from her the way she took everything from you. She wanted a war. She's got one. Margaret Henderson was charged with felony assault on a minor. It should have been an open and shut case. We had video evidence. We had witnesses. We had Emma's injuries. But the prosecutor, a man named David Marsh who had received campaign donations from Margaret's husband, offered Margaret a plea deal: misdemeanor reckless endangerment, 6 months probation, a $500 fine. Absolutely not, Sarah Chin said when she heard. This was a violent assault on a disabled child. She should be facing years in prison. The victim's disability actually works against us, Marsh said coldly. A jury might think she's fragile, that she falls easily. Margaret's lawyers will argue it was an accident. Better to take the sure thing. It wasn't an accident, I shouted. She kicked my daughter's wheelchair deliberately. It's on video. The video is grainy. A good defense lawyer will create reasonable doubt. Trust me, this is the best we can do. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear the office apart. But Sarah put a hand on my arm and pulled me aside. Let it go, she whispered. The criminal case doesn't matter. We're going to bury her in civil court. We're going to take every penny she has. And I'm going to make sure everyone in this country knows what Margaret Henderson did to your daughter. Margaret pleaded guilty to misdemeanor reckless endangerment. She paid her $500 fine and walked out of court smiling. Emma watched the news coverage from her hospital bed. She didn't cry. She didn't say anything. She just turned off the TV and stared at the wall. That night, I heard her talking to herself in the darkness. I'm ugly now. No one will ever want to look at me. She took my smile and she got away with it. My heart shattered into a million pieces. But I couldn't let Emma see me break. I had to be strong for her. I had to finish what Margaret had started. The war was far from over. The civil trial began 8 months after the assault. Emma was 17 now, still recovering physically and emotionally. She had started seeing a therapist for PTSD. She had nightmares every night about Margaret standing over her, about the moment her face hit the concrete, about the taste of blood in her mouth. She refused to smile for photos. She covered her mouth when she laughed. She stopped going outside because she was terrified that Margaret or someone else would attack her again. My vibrant, creative, joyful daughter had been replaced by a frightened, anxious shadow. The trial was brutal. Margaret's lawyers tried to paint Emma as a liar and me as a money-hungry opportunist. They brought in experts who testified that Emma's cerebral palsy made her unstable and prone to falls. They showed photos of Emma from before the assault, smiling and happy, and suggested that her current anxiety and depression had nothing to do with Margaret's actions. Then it was Emma's turn to testify. She wheeled herself to the witness stand, her hands trembling. Margaret sat at the defense table, looking bored and annoyed, as if this whole trial was an inconvenient waste of her time. Sarah Chin asked Emma to describe what happened that day. Emma's voice was barely above a whisper at first. But as she spoke, she grew stronger. Mrs. Henderson hated me from the moment we moved in, Emma said. She hated me because I'm disabled. She said my wheelchair was ugly. She said I brought down property values. She said I didn't belong in her neighborhood. And on that Saturday morning she decided to teach me a lesson. She kicked my wheelchair. On purpose. I saw her face right before she did it. She wanted to hurt me. She wanted to scare me. She wanted to make me so afraid that my mom and I would move away and she could pretend we never existed. When I hit the ground I felt my teeth break. I tasted blood. And I thought, this is it. This is how I die. Because I was born different and someone hated me for it. But I didn't die. I survived. And now I have to live the rest of my life with the scars, both the ones you can see and the ones you can't. I can't smile without thinking about what she took from me. I can't go outside without wondering if someone else will decide I don't belong. I can't look in the mirror without seeing her handiwork. Mrs. Henderson destroyed more than my teeth that day. She destroyed my sense of safety, my confidence, my trust in people. And the worst part? She doesn't even care. Look at her. She's sitting there like this is just a minor inconvenience. Like I'm just a minor inconvenience. But I'm not. I'm a human being. I have feelings. I have dreams. I have a right to exist in this world without being assaulted for having a disability. And if this jury has any sense of justice, any sense of compassion, they'll make sure Margaret Henderson finally faces consequences for what she did. By the time Emma finished, half the jury was crying. Even the judge looked emotional. Margaret's lawyers had no questions for her. What could they possibly say? The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. They found Margaret Henderson liable for assault, battery, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and disability-based hate crime. The damages were staggering, $5 million. We had won. But as we left the courthouse, Emma looked at me with those sad, hollow eyes and said, "Money doesn't give me my smile back, Mom. It doesn't make the nightmares stop." She still got what she wanted. She broke me. Emma was wrong about one thing. Margaret hadn't gotten what she wanted. She wanted us gone, humiliated, erased from her perfect little world. Instead, I was about to erase her from existence. The lawsuit had bankrupted Margaret and her husband. They had to sell their house, their cars, even Margaret's precious jewelry. But I wasn't satisfied. I wanted more. I hired private investigators. I dug into every aspect of Margaret Henderson's life. And what I found was a treasure trove of criminal activity. Margaret had been embezzling from the HOA for 7 years. Over $300,000 in community funds had been funneled into her personal accounts. She had been using HOA money to pay for vacations, cosmetic surgery, designer clothes, and expensive dinners. I compiled all the evidence and turned it over to the FBI. Federal agents raided Margaret's home on a Tuesday morning. The news cameras were there, I made sure of it. The footage of Margaret being led out in handcuffs, her face pale with terror, played on every local news station for weeks. But I still wasn't done. I discovered that Margaret's son Brad had a warrant out for his arrest in another state for drug trafficking. I made an anonymous tip to the police. He was arrested within days. I found out that Margaret's husband had been having an affair with his secretary for 3 years. I sent all the evidence to Margaret anonymously. She filed for divorce immediately, and in the settlement she got nothing. Her husband's lawyers argued that her criminal activity had destroyed the family's finances. I contacted every news outlet in the state and gave them Emma's story. Within weeks, Margaret Henderson became the national face of HOA tyranny and disability discrimination. She was destroyed. She lost her freedom, sentenced to 5 years in federal prison for fraud and embezzlement. She lost her family, her husband divorced her, and her son wanted nothing to do with her from prison. She lost her reputation. She was universally reviled as a monster who had assaulted a disabled child. She lost everything. And I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. With Margaret Henderson behind bars and the lawsuit settled, we finally had the resources to help Emma heal. We moved to a new neighborhood, a genuinely welcoming community where our neighbors actually cared about us. We got Emma the best therapist, the best dental work, the best treatment money could buy. Slowly, painfully, Emma started to recover. It took 2 years, but eventually she got her dental implants. The day the dentist removed the temporary bridge and she saw her new teeth for the first time, Emma cried. "I look normal again," she whispered. "You always looked normal," I told her. "But I'm glad you feel whole again." That night, Emma picked up her sketch pad for the first time in years. She drew a picture of a butterfly emerging from a cocoon, its wings spread wide and beautiful. "What are you going to do with that?" I asked. "I'm going to start an organization," Emma said, "for kids with disabilities who face bullying and discrimination. I'm going to make sure what happened to me never happens to anyone else." And she did. Emma's foundation, Smile Forward, now helps hundreds of disabled children every year. She speaks at schools, at conferences, at congressional hearings. She has become a powerful advocate for disability rights, turning her pain into purpose. Margaret Henderson tried to destroy my daughter. Instead, she created a warrior. 3 years into her prison sentence, a letter arrived at our house. It was from Margaret. The letter was long, rambling, full of self-pity and excuses. But at the very end, there were 3 sentences that caught my attention. "I was wrong to treat your daughter the way I did. My prejudice and hatred hurt an innocent child, and I will carry that shame for the rest of my life. I'm sorry." I showed the letter to Emma. She read it carefully, then folded it and handed it back to me. "Do you believe her?" I asked. Emma shook her head. "It doesn't matter if she's sorry. Sorry doesn't give me back the 2 years I spent terrified and broken. Sorry doesn't erase the nightmares. Sorry doesn't fix what she destroyed. Do you want to write back?" "No," Emma said firmly. "She's not worth my time or energy anymore. I've moved on. She's the one who has to live with what she did, not me." I was so proud of my daughter in that moment. She had every right to be bitter, to be angry, to be consumed by hatred. But she chose differently. She chose to build something beautiful from the ashes of what Margaret had tried to destroy. 5 years have passed since that terrible day. Emma is 21 now, a college graduate with a degree in social work. She runs her foundation full-time, helping disabled children navigate a world that often doesn't want them. Margaret Henderson was released from prison 6 months ago. She's living in a tiny apartment, working minimum wage, completely isolated from her former life. I saw her once at a grocery store. She looked at me, then quickly looked away, her face filled with shame. I felt nothing. Not hatred. Not satisfaction. Nothing. She was irrelevant to me now. Emma still has hard days. Days when the PTSD flares up. Days when she covers her mouth when she smiles, even though her teeth are perfect. Days when she wonders if she really does belong in this world. But those days are becoming fewer and fewer. Emma is healing. She's thriving. She's proving every single day that disability doesn't mean inability, that wheelchairs don't define worth, that different doesn't mean less than. And me? I learned something important through this nightmare. Sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to become more ruthless than they are. Margaret Henderson thought she could destroy us because we were weak, because we were different, because we didn't have power. She was wrong. We had something more powerful than her connections, her money, or her hatred. We had truth, justice, and an unbreakable will to survive. Emma's story didn't end when Margaret knocked her down. It didn't end when we won the lawsuit. It didn't even end when Margaret went to prison. Emma's story is still being written. Every child she helps. Every smile she restores. Every life she changes. That's her real victory. Not revenge, though I won't pretend that didn't feel good. Her real victory is living a beautiful, meaningful life despite everything that was done to her. Margaret Henderson tried to break my daughter's smile. Instead, Emma learned to help others smile again. And if you ask me, that's the sweetest revenge of all.